probably start in 2 or 3 minutes as we get everyone in. I would encourage all of you to open up your screens so we can all see each other. That makes it a little more like an in-person meeting. And of course, we're all wishing we were meeting in person, and that's still not possible given the pandemic. But the more we can do to make this more like an actual meeting, the better. So if you would like to unmute to open up your screen, we'd appreciate that. We expect about 20 to 23 people today, so of the public, and right now there's, I believe, only about 8, so we're going to give it a few more minutes. Again, good morning to those of you who are just joining. We are still admitting people to the meeting, and a few people, of course, as always, are running a little late. We're going to wait another minute or two before we get started. We're expecting about 22 members of the public. Lindsay, or Carrie, if you have an overview of the number of people, why don't you tell me if and when we hit about 18? And we'll go ahead and get started at that point.
Okay. We're at 13 right now.
We're at 13. Okay.
Oh, 14, sorry.
Okay. Well, we'll give it like 2 more minutes and then we'll start even if we haven't gotten higher. If you are here joining on a phone, I think we have one person who's got a phone number only. It would be great if you could identify yourself. Is that still true, Lindsay?
They have since linked up, it looks like, so they
Great.
are now linked with their video. Thank you, whoever did that.
This is actually quite complex choreography in Zoom because, as I think all of you know from signing up, we're going to ask you all to work in 3 separate small groups today. And you hopefully have signed up in advance for those groups, but we need to know who you are to put you in the right group. So if you are only with a phone number, or if you have a different name on your screen, or particularly if you've logged in using an email different than the one that you sent when you registered, it would be great if you could identify yourself to Lindsay. Lindsay, Placeworks, is a participant in the meeting, and you can send a chat to her. If she doesn't recognize your name, she'll be texting you or chatting to you to make sure that we get you in the right groups. And I think we'll go ahead and get started. And the first thing we want to do is let everyone know that we do have Spanish translation available for this meeting. Ricky from our office Ricardo Pozos from our office is going to go ahead and make a short announcement in Spanish to let people know that they can benefit him if they would benefit from Spanish translation or being in a Spanish-speaking small group. Ricky, you want to do that?
Thank you, David. Hola, muy buenos días, bienvenidos a todos. Como dijo David, tengo un anuncio breve. Si alguien necesita ayuda en español, interpretación, o tienen comentarios o mensajes en español, por favor, mándenmelos a mí y les ayudaremos. Gracias. Go ahead, David.
Okay, thank you very much. We do anticipate, from what we know from the RSVPs, it seemed like everyone attending would be comfortable in English, but we do want to do that at all our meetings to make sure that we have Spanish-speaking capabilities available. And now I want to introduce Eva Kelly from the city of Hollister, and she's going to make a short welcome as well.
Thank you, David. Good morning. I'm Eva Kelly from the City of Hollister's Planning Department. And today we have from the city, Maria Mendez, Aureli Perez, Socorro Zendejas, Amber Cameron, and Mariah Marsan. And we apologize, Amber and Mariah are having some video issues, so they may or may not be able to turn their videos on this meeting. And then from PlaceWorks, we have Tarina Wilson, Michelle Hook, David Early, who is speaking with you, Ricardo and Angelica, and then project questions is Carrie Stone, who's our project manager for the general plan. And then we also have Frederick Venter from Kimley Horn, who is a part of our general plan team doing most of our traffic and circulation analysis. And we're really happy to have you guys all here today and excited to talk about the general plan policies with you all.
Great. Thank you, Eva, and thank you again, all of you, for joining. There are still a few of you who don't have your video on, and we certainly understand if you have bandwidth issues. There are a couple people on the city team, there are a couple people on the PlaceWorks team who have inadequate bandwidth to run their video. But if you do have that, it makes the meeting just a little more like an in-person meeting if we can all open up our video channels. So I'd encourage you to do that if you possibly can. We're going to now put up a little poll that we're going to take. It's just 2 questions. We want to ask you in what capacity you're here at this meeting, and we also want to find out if there are people who would like a tutorial in the Zoom technology. So I believe that poll is going to go up. While we're waiting for that, let me say too that we do have 2 people identified through the chat, on their screens. If you have questions about Zoom, you can go to Tarina, whose name on this meeting is Zoom Questions. And if you have questions about the material, you can go to Carrie Stone, whose name on here. Carrie, what is your name on here? I don't see you anymore.
It's Project Questions Asked
Project
Me.
Questions, there we have it. So you can chat to Project Questions. So we do have the poll up now, and please just fill it out if you're here as a resident, a business owner, a CBO representative or other, and also if you would like an orientation in Zoom. Looks like we have about 12 so far. How many attendees do we have right now?
We have 16.
16. So 4 of you, I hope, can still fill in the poll for us. Oh, it looks like Zoom is expecting 14, and I think everyone has filled it out of the people Zoom is expecting. So we'll go with that. And can everyone see that poll result already, or do I need to do something to make it visible? It shows.
Yeah, but I will be sharing that momentarily.
Okay. So Lindsay will put that up, but I can tell you in advance, the most of you are actually here as CBO representatives with 9 out of 14. There are 5 residents and 2 business owners. So it's a good mix today. It's great. We are having another meeting tomorrow night, which is at 6 o'clock, which is probably a more accessible time for many residents. So we expect a bigger resident group then. And I want to say now, and I'll say again at the end of the meeting, you all are welcome to come again. At these meetings, we have about 20 different topics to discuss, and you're only going to get to do 3 today. So if this whets your appetite and you want to do 3 more, you can come tomorrow night at 6 o'clock, do the same meeting. Please do sign up again in advance, and we would have you then able to participate in another 3 topics. And that's really true even more so for your friends or family members. If they would like to participate, please let them know that there's still plenty of time to sign up and to come to the workshop. I did want to mention also that we are recording this meeting, just so everyone knows. It will be available in both a written summary form and parts of it as videos once the meeting is over. So I wanted to make sure that you were aware of that. Lindsay or Carrie, is there anything else that I should mention before we go on to the presentation?
I don't think so.
Okay. I'm going to share my screen, which is always a little bit cumbersome to do, actually. And now I need to figure out, how do I make it full screen? I never
go to view, David.
There we are. Haha, success. Okay, so I'm going to give a brief presentation just about what we're doing today and a little background on the general plan. Shouldn't take more than 10 minutes or so. We'll take some questions from you, and then we're going to go into the small group exercise. This is the agenda for today, and we've already had those welcomes and introductions. I'm doing the presentation now, questions and answers, and then we'll have 3 separate small groups, each of which will have a brief presentation, your discussion, and then brief reports back. And we'll wrap up and adjourn right around 11 this morning. So I wanted to start, I know many of you who are here today have already been to some of our other meetings and you're familiar with this, but I wanted just to do a reminder and also introduce people who may be new here today, just what is the general plan. So the general plan is a document that's required under state law. Every city and every county in the state has a general plan. And it really is the blueprint for growth and development and also conservation for the entire community. So it's the document that establishes the community vision. It creates supporting goals, policies, and actions. They're primarily about land use and development, but they also look at things like safety and noise and community design and traffic. And it's intended to provide a consistent direction for future development. It balances growth, conservation, and quality of life. And it also documents the baseline environmental conditions in the city. So as they change over time, there's a good understanding of what those changes are. The general plan has a series of required, what are called elements in the state law, which are essentially chapters. The required elements in the general plan, there are 7 of them, and they are land use. And in Hollister's case, that chapter is called Land Use and Community Design. There's circulation, housing, natural resources and conservation. The state law calls it conservation. State law refers to an open space policy element, and Hollister has open space and agriculture. And then Hollister has a health and safety element, which also includes the 7th element, which is noise. The existing Hollister general plan also today has what's called an optional element that covers community services and facilities. And through this general plan update, we're going to be adding at a minimum elements about arts and economic development, and also possibly about environmental justice, or else environmental justice policies will be included in other parts of the general plan. But those are now required in most communities by law as well. The current general plan, which in my opinion is actually quite a comprehensive and excellent document, was last updated in 2005. But even though it's a good document, of course, it's been 15 years already. General plans are intended to be updated usually about every 10 years, and they generally have about a 20-year life. That's why our project is called Hollister 2040. And so it is really time to do an update, even though it's a very good document. So the goals of this update are to engage the broad spectrum of the community like we're doing today, to establish a vision for Hollister in 2040, to maintain the city's small town agricultural character, to manage growth consistent with your community's goals, to ensure high quality development, to support economic development, and also to respond to state mandates and the evolving general plan guidelines, which have changed over the last 15 years. And there are a number of legal requirements that have to be fulfilled within the context of the general plan. The project we're doing actually has a lot of different components. The main piece is the general plan update that's on the top of this slide, but we're also working with Frederick's office on implementation of Senate Bill 743, which changes the way that traffic impacts are assessed in California. We're preparing a climate action plan to work with climate change and greenhouse gas emissions. We're creating a hazard mitigation plan that addresses things like wildfire hazard and earthquakes. We're preparing a full environmental impact report on all of those documents. And we're conducting a municipal service review, which is the document that's required regionally if the city wants to annex additional lands for future development. So there's a lot of things that we're doing there. We are also looking at a variety of geographies, if you will, and this map up on the screen shows them. You're probably all aware that the city has, of course, its own city limit. It also has what's called a sphere of influence. The city limit on this map is shown in black, and the current sphere of influence, which is the area already designated to possibly be added to the city, is shown with the dashed orangish line. But we also have an urban service area that's even larger that the city worked with on the county some years ago, and is an area where urban services may be extended in the future. And we have an even larger area called our planning area, which is the purple area. This is an area not probably intended for future urbanization, but whose boundaries affect the city. And so we want to think about what's happening in that area, even though a lot of it is within the unincorporated county. So we have all those areas we're looking at, and we are doing this general plan for the entire planning area. There are a lot of opportunities here for public involvement. These include workshops and events like this virtual workshop. We have separate online activities. We have an online survey right now that's available on our website for you to give more input about all these policy options. We have a general plan advisory committee that's meeting regularly, and they'll be having 5 meetings starting at the end of this month to talk about all these policy issues. We're making regular reports to both the Planning Commission and the City Council. Due to COVID-19, of course, so far on this project, we've had to have all of our meetings virtually. By the time we get to the end of the project, I hope we'll all be meeting in person again, but for the time being, everything is happening virtually. We do have a very robust website, as I already mentioned. I think all of you have probably been to it in order to find this meeting, but just to remind you of that, Hollister2040.org has a lot of materials and information on it, and it does have access right now to an online survey to give detailed feedback about all the issues we're going to be speaking about today. Here's our schedule for the process, and we're on the 3rd line of this schedule right now. So we've already completed baseline conditions and future trends. There's an exhaustive baseline condition analysis available on the project website. We've already created a draft vision, and many of you helped to do that, and I'll show that in a few moments. We're now doing policy assessments and design alternatives, and that's the subject of our meeting today. That will conclude with action by the GPAC and a review by the City Council later this spring. Once that's over, we'll be working on both the general plan itself and the other work products that I already mentioned, the climate action plan, the hazard mitigation plan, and all of those together with the environmental impact report should be published fall of this year. And then, even though those are published as a draft document, there's a very long review period, which will involve additional public meetings, meetings of the GPAC, the Planning Commission, and the City Council, and we expect full adoption by summer of 2022. So these are 2 slides about our values and vision statement. When you all worked with us on the vision, we came up with both a set of 4 values that you see here: equity, diversity, innovation, and sustainability. And then we also came up with a more detailed vision statement, which is intended to be kind of a 1-page document that says where the city is headed over these next 20 years. I'm not going to read it all now, but I'll say that some of the features that are in it are maintaining the agricultural character of the community and the surrounding agricultural uses, Hollister's historic past, the strong architectural character, but also establishing Hollister as an innovation hub with its downtown, its industrial park and airport, with tourism as well, and additional economic development in all of those ways. So those are some of the main concepts in this vision, and this draft vision is available on the project website already as well. So what are we going to do today? Well, we've put out a document with a lot of information about 24 separate issues that will be covered through policy alternatives and that the GPAC will be considering over 5 meetings in late March and throughout April. Today, you've already chosen in advance some of these topics to work on. Some of these topics have been combined because they're relatively smaller. Some of them are being discussed today as individual topics, but you all have had a chance to choose 3 groups to be in. If 3 wasn't enough for you, as I said, you can always come back tomorrow and talk about 3 more of the topics. But so you should all have groups. If you're not sure what groups you were in, or if you know, some of you actually only signed up for, I think one person might have signed up for no groups, several signed up for only 2. If you want to add another group rather than being placed in that group, send a chat message to Lindsay and she will place you in one of those groups. There are a couple of you, and I think you received an email about this, who made a request and you were the only person who asked to talk about that item. So you don't get to do that today, and instead we've chosen a different group for you, and we apologize for that, but there just wasn't interest of more than one person on a couple of the items. So today we're going to be doing this small group exercise. As I already said, you're going to be assigned into your breakout rooms based on your pre-registered topic. There are going to be 3 rounds, and each of those is about 15 minutes. I will do a brief presentation before each of those rounds to talk about the issues that all the groups will be covering. Then you'll talk about the item, and then we'll have very brief report backs, literally about a minute per group after each round. So if you're the spokesperson, prepare yourself for a minute to report. We're going to take notes on all of the inputs, so your reports back are not the only way, but we do want everybody to get to hear from all of the groups about what they talked about. This process in your group, as I already said, will be a presentation on the topics, then your small group discussion, including introducing yourselves very briefly, having a discussion about the policy issues, and a staff person will take notes, and then you all will create a quick summary so that your reporter can talk about both common ground and any divergent opinions that you have. For the conversations, we do want to ask you to really focus on your own ideas of experience. Sometimes people will say, well, I think most people want X. We don't really want you to tell us what you think other people want. We'd like to hear what you want about each of these items. And we also really want you to listen to each other. We want respectful conversation. We're curious about all your differences. We hope you will be curious as well. We do want everyone to get a chance to participate, and your facilitator will make sure that everybody in your group gets to speak. And I want to remind all of you that your thoughts and questions are very valuable. So if you're a little on the shy side, please do speak up and let us know what you think about the issues. And I do want to mention now, and I'll mention again about, the next steps. And I already alluded to all of these, but there is one more workshop tomorrow, Wednesday from 6 to 8. People can still sign up for that at hollister2040.org. And you can also go there to take that online survey that I mentioned. And then the GPAC will be meeting to review all the same information from 6 to 8 p.m. in virtual meetings that happen on 5 Tuesdays. They're almost consecutive. They're March 23rd, 30th, 6th, 13th, and then we miss April 20th, and we have a final one on April 27th. So those are 5 workshops, and you're all welcome to attend those, and they will have opportunities for public involvement at each of those meetings as well. So that's the end of my presentation for now. I'm going to stop right now and open it up for any questions, and then we'll try and get started on your first group. Any questions at this time? If you do have questions, that you wanted to share in the chat, you can do that as well and send them to Carrie, who says project questions. My computer just did a very strong thing and I can no longer see any of you.
I have not received any questions.
Okay. All right, I am waiting a moment here because I am a little confused by my own computer. I may have to actually shut off my computer to make this work. You all can see me still, I assume. Is this true?
Yes, we can see you, David.
That's so nice. I wish I could see you. Oh, there you are. Okay, nice. I solved my little problem. Okay, if there are no questions, I think then that we're essentially going to move now to the small group part of the meeting. We're not going to put you in the small groups quite yet because I do have a presentation. And I'm going to talk about the items that we're looking at today. So I'm going to call up that slideshow, and that'll take me a minute again. And then I will go into a presentation about those items. Okay, hang on just a moment. All right, so as I mentioned, for each of the beginnings of the small groups, I'm going to talk about all the items to be discussed. This first round will take the longest because first off, there are actually 5 small groups in this round and there are only 4 in the others. And in the others, there will be some topics repeated. So to this time, I have to talk about 5 subjects. In the next 2, I'll only have 2 or 3 subjects. So bear with me. And I hope, even though you all will be only assigned to one of these 5 groups, and you should know which of those you signed up for, do pay attention to all of them, particularly, for instance, if you did sign up for parks or retail leakage or growth management. Those are all things that will be discussed again later, and I won't be going through the presentation again on those items. So this is the only time I'll be talking about each of these items. So let me talk first about parks and new school funding. There'll be a group talking about that now, and there'll be another small group talking about that subject or those 2 subjects in round 2. In terms of parks, there is already an established park standard in the city of 4 acres of park space per 1,000 residents. That's implemented for all new development. But the 2018 Park Facility Master Plan suggested a standard of 5 acres per 1,000 residents instead. Right now, the city has about 3.5 acres per 1,000 residents. So there is some question about what kind of park standard you want. And then there's also a vision overall for parks, increasing parks, targeting improvements to parks overall, and particularly at Vista Hill Park and some other facilities. So in your conversation today, we'll be asking you what actions, if any, you would like to see in the general plan, including parkland provision by new developments, public accessibility of private parks and open space, prioritization of master plan park issues, and a possible gap analysis to look at where there are gaps in existing parks, trails, and open spaces. So that's what you'll be doing on parks and recreation. That same group will be looking at new school funding. And the city does, as allowed by state law, collect a school impact fee from all developers, but that fee is capped by state law at a quite low amount, which is, I think everyone pretty much agrees, is insufficient by itself to construct new school facilities. But that limit is put in place by the state under what's called Senate Bill 50. Additional school funding is usually generated through incentives to developers or bond measures or other revenues that somehow come to the school district. But the shortfall can be as much as it's generally the fact that those developer funds only pay about 25 to maybe 40% in the best case of the cost to construct a new school. So gap closure needs to occur somehow. So how do you do that? Well, we want to have you talk about that today. Would there be a new school construction bond measure? Would there be incentives for developers to voluntarily provide additional school funding? Would there be specific plans created to have voluntary developer funding as a precondition for development? Or would you perhaps lobby efforts at the state to expand funding of the public school system? You could choose as many of these as you want, but this is a very important issue, obviously, for school funding in the state. Second item to be talked about today is economic development. It will also be discussed by another group in round 3. There are quite a number of economic development issues. The first is general economic development. There will be an economic development element with a focus on diversifying local jobs, supporting existing businesses, increasing retail options, and supporting the city's fiscal goals. We're going to ask you to look at this list of possible economic development policies and actions and choose as many as you think are appropriate that might go into the general plan. We're also going to ask you to look at the retail market and what we call retail leakage. And what retail leakage means is that people living in Hollister end up going elsewhere to spend their money. And so the money, so to speak, leaks out of Hollister and goes elsewhere. If there were more and other stores, then presumably you'd have less retail leakage. And so we're going to ask you about how the city might address that. There's a series of 10 possible policies that you're going to be considering as to which ones you think might be appropriate to include in the general plan. And then we'll be looking at job creation. Current job growth, as I think we all know, does not align with the population and household growth in either Hollister or San Benito County. And many Hollister residents are working outside the city. And lots of people have said that they really wish that there were more job opportunities within Hollister. There's already a large inventory of land to accommodate new businesses. And we want to talk with you about what also might be done by the city to increase job creation. We have 2 ideas, and perhaps you'll have additional ideas as well. And then tourism. There already are about 21,000 tourists visiting through San Benito County to either Pinnacles National Park and or the State Vehicle Recreation Area. But Hollister captures relatively little business from these visitors. Most of them actually go around Hollister rather than right through Hollister, and very few of them spend money in the town. So we're wanting to look at what tourism-related things might be included in the general plan, and we've got a list of 9 possible items to include in the general plan there. So that's it on economic development. We're going to go now to our third topic, which is growth management. Some of you will be talking about that in round 1, some of you in round 3. Growth management is a big issue in Hollister, and I have the most slides about this item, as for any of the items in this slideshow. And what we want to look at here is how the city is going to manage its own growth and how it will coordinate with the county about growth moving into the future. We have done a pretty exhaustive analysis of development, demand, and capacity. We're looking at development over the next 20 years of somewhere we think between 2,000 and 6,800 units. That's the demand in the greater Hollister area, which includes both Hollister and any areas immediately adjacent to Hollister that might be developed by the county. Really doesn't matter if the house is built next to Hollister in the county or within the city, it's still a house in the greater Hollister area. So somewhere between 2,000 and 6,800 units are likely to be in demand, and the city needs to think about whether it wants to try and accommodate all of those units through its land use designations. There's certainly enough capacity in the general plan today to accommodate our lowest number of 2,000. But if there were moderate growth, we may need as many as 220 additional acres to accommodate that development. And if there were a much more robust growth at say 6,800 units, that would require anywhere from 70 to 636 acres, depending on the development intensity. So that's an issue that you'll be looking at in your group. We'll also be asking you to look at issues around wastewater treatment to the areas that are outside the city limits. Right now, the city has been supplying county development with wastewater service, but it appears that that may not have been in strict compliance with state law. There is a government code, section 56133, if you're interested, that says that the city really cannot provide service outside its city limits, even inside the sphere of influence, unless it's planning to expand into that area, and outside the sphere of influence only for immediate or pending health and safety threats. The city has actually provided sewer service outside the city limits, both in the sphere of influence and outside the sphere of influence on a number of occasions. And those previous projects and those, and there even are some agreements about this that may be in violation of state law. So the city needs to look at that very closely. So we'll be asking you to look at the sphere of influence and talk about possibly expanding it. We have options that do not expand the sphere at all, that expand by 69 acres, 220 acres, 636 acres, and you can see them all in this buff color on the expansion areas, and all the way into the entire area where the county general plan anticipates urban development. And so 5 different options that would address these questions of both accommodating growth and also accommodating the county's future growth. We're also going to be asking you to look at a series of wastewater service policies about expansion of service, both inside and outside the sphere of influence. And we're going to be asking you to consider whether the city should remain in the memorandum of understanding that affects wastewater treatment right now. Finally, there has been some talk about possibly creating a joint operation of the wastewater treatment plant so that the city would turn some or all of the operation of that plant over to a different agency that the city would be a part of, but that might include both the unincorporated county and perhaps even the city of San Juan Bautista as well. So we'll be asking you finally to look at that issue. So a lot of issues under growth management, a lot of them having to do with the provision of wastewater service and the others having to do with the sphere of influence. I think this is my last item, and it's going to be to talk about the special planning areas, or maybe I have one more after this. We're going to be talking, though, this general plan does have a series of special planning areas that the city has asked us as a team to look at. Those are shown on the map here in blue, green, and purple. They are the Buena Vista Corridor, the Meridian Road Extension, and the Union Road Corridor. Some of you will be talking in your small group about what land uses should occur in those areas. We have, for the Buena Vista Corridor, not changing the general plan, and several other options as well that maintain the existing agricultural character of that Buena Vista area, or that have more urbanization within the area, as well as additional roadways. And so you'll be looking at those for Buena Vista. You'll also be looking at some alternatives for the Meridian area that don't change the general plan, or that either put new roads through and connect Meridian Street through this area all the way out to Fairview, and that also have differing levels of residential development within them. And then finally, you'll be looking at the Union Road area, possibly changing the general plan designations in there, again, to either accommodate more or less urban development, either by keeping the area as on this map almost entirely in agriculture, or other options that have more urbanization, which is shown in the buff color on these drawings, with the option as well whether to have a mixed use node, which you see in this half circle as well, and whether you would like that to be a part of the Union Road area as well. So there's a lot of different options for Union Road. And then finally, I did say there was, I thought one more item, one more group that we'll be meeting then this first round is going to talk about environmental justice and climate change. State law does require now that the general plan address environmental justice impacts. Hollister does not have a state-defined disadvantaged community and is therefore not necessarily required to have an environmental justice element, but some people have suggested that the city should create one nonetheless because there are issues of equity within the city. So environmental justice topics includes the ones you see listed here, from access to affordable and nutritious food, bike and pedestrian safe streets, exposure to pollution, public participation in processes, and equal access to public services and facilities. And we'll be asking that group to talk about possible actions that might be included in the general plan to address these environmental justice elements. That same group will also talk about climate change and greenhouse gas emissions. We are, as I've already said, preparing a climate action plan that's going to establish emission reduction targets and identified policies and a roadmap to help meet the city's GHG reduction goals. And we have a series of questions for you about what strategies you would like to see included in both the general plan and the climate action plan. So that's what that last group will be doing. That group will also be looking at natural hazards and climate change, what's sometimes called resiliency. How do we respond to climate-related events like flooding, extreme heat, drought, and wildfires? And we'll be asking you to look at some possible policies and actions regarding those issues as well. So that's the end of that particular presentation. I know it was a lot of information, and I want to explain, I want to promise you that the others won't be as long, but unless, even if you have questions, I think that you can ask those in your small groups. So I'm going to go ahead and ask Lindsay to put everyone into their groups right now. And each group, once you're all situated, you'll have about 15 minutes for very brief introductions and then to discuss the items on your list. Enjoy your time in the groups.
Hi there, everyone remaining. You should have received a notification to join a small group, so feel free to hop on over and get in there. Okay. Hi there, CG God. Feel free to stay in the main meeting room and just hang out with me if you don't want to join a small group. Or if you want me to take any comments that you have, I am here for that as well. But just note that you are muted right now if you are trying to talk. To my PlaceWorks team, I know that I will be sharing my screen. Can you please let me know what the best thing to share is for this portion?
Um, yeah, hi everybody, welcome. I just had a strange glitch on my computer for the second time and could not unmute myself, but here I am. I think we have all the groups back, and Torina, in terms of your question, we are going to have reports back now. And so I think that whoever has the capability to share those reports could do so, but we do want to be very brief, so we won't spend time trying to get the reports up. It's easier to just go ahead and make the reports. So let me ask, I know we ended up with one group, ironically, that had just one person in it, which was Carol Lenore talking about growth management. So maybe we'll start there. I think the other people who signed up for that group maybe didn't show up this morning, so I apologize for that. Carol, do you want to talk very briefly? We have a minute for you to talk, and then I'll call on the group that I know had Jason and Rob in it, and then we'll go to the other groups as well.
For that, you can just click on the link for growth management. It's the first comment highlighted under group 1. That should be 3 points.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
What are you wanting me to discuss the issue of growth management? Just
Yeah,
briefly?
for 1 minute.
Okay, well, I told, oh, I can't remember her name. Was that Carrie?
Yes.
I said growth management goes back a long ways. It's changed throughout the decades. Definitely in favor of growth management. But again, with the SB 330, you can only go so far with growth management. They don't want to see impediments. However, I did say that I am a big fan of the rating scale system, but a reasonable rating scale system as it relates to growth management. I think that you get a very good product when you have them competing against each other for amenities, but again, reasonable amenities to where they can make their project work and still make a profit. You know, they're in a private business. People get bashed for making money, but if you get a good project, you know, that's how it works. But yeah, growth management is good. But again, we can't set limits, so I'm not sure how we incorporate a growth management ordinance, as we don't have one right now. Yeah, growth management is good. I tend to lean on the higher side, and the reason I do that is because I think you should always plan for the bigger scenario than the lesser scenario. The full build out is what I always like to see, and then you can always pare it back from there.
Okay, thank you, Carol. That's great.
Thank you.
The next group I'll call on is the one that looked at the special planning areas. Jason or Rob or Sonia, who's going to present there?
Yes, good morning. Of the different options that were presented, it seemed like option 3 got the most interest and favor, primarily because it was adding roads. It preserved agriculture to the northwest of Hollister, between the new road and Wright Road. And at the same time, we were pointed out that there's an addition of linear park at that roadway that would be added. So there seem to be more obvious benefits that if there's going to be expansion in that area. Option 3 was an effective compromise of bringing more to the city than less in what we got. And briefly, we just looked at Union Road for a second. I did disclose that I represent folks with property in that area. That there are some projects that are going to be brought forward there that would lean towards either 5A or 5B because they address a node in that option.
Great. Okay, thanks. Yeah, so you all had a lot to look at. You had 3 different special planning areas, and it sounds like you got through kind of 1.5 of them. And congratulations for doing that. We had a group that looked at climate change and equity. Who was going to report from that group?
We were in the middle of asking, so I would ask either Robin or Amanda if either of you are comfortable giving just a brief overview.
Sorry, I can go. Well, I think that for the most part, everything looked really, really compelling that was listed in the options for this topic. I think what kind of came up over and again was really creating timelines or making sure that there's a system for addressing all of the elements that look really great on paper, but just seeing how those are going to be implemented and what the timeline is going to look like to assure success there.
So essentially, your group thought that pretty much all of the policy options for both climate and equity should all be given careful consideration.
Yes.
Great. Okay, excellent. I think we had a group that talked about both parks and schools. Who's going to present for that group?
So this is Amber. We also were in the middle of finishing up and trying to decide. So I don't know if there's anyone from group 2 that would feel comfortable discussing the topics that we covered.
Yeah, we discussed, well, I know for me, Vista Park Hill and doing some improvements to those facilities and possibly expanding the limits of the border there of the park is something that's important to us. Obviously, the possibilities of a new high school in the future, school expansion is another thing that that was important to us in our meeting.
Great. So it sounds like your group focused mostly on Vista Park Hill. Is that right?
Yeah, I think we were kind of small, and so I think I'm the only one that was really talking that park thing.
Okay. And anybody else from your group want to add anything? Particularly, did you talk about any other items, group members, on schools or any of the other parks?
Yes, we did. This is Jeff Small. I thought it was a great conversation because we were able to talk about the parks and potential synergies and different STEM programs that were brought up, with science and food, the importance of healthy eating. And we started to talk a little bit about some of the challenges that schools face in terms of funding new facilities. But obviously it was a very limited time. But I think that there's certainly a lot to talk about, and it was a good conversation.
Great. Good. Okay. Thank you very much for adding to that. The last group we had was on economic development. Who's going to report for that group?
Hi, this is Lynn Overtree with the San Benito Ag Land Trust. So we had kind of an ag representation, historical society representation, and Parks and Rec commissioner. And so that the focus we kind of heard was that we need to capitalize. Can you hear me okay? We need to capitalize more on the historic district. A lot of people aren't even familiar that it's there, and provide more funding to support it. We also need to make business opportunities easier for businesses that want to get started there. It seems very cumbersome at this stage, and people will go elsewhere to develop their businesses and use the existing infrastructure. In some cases, there's buildings that are there that have remained in town that have remained empty and could be used. And some of the ideas from Christine, the Parks and Rec Commissioner, she was saying that there's a great selection of parks in town, but there is a missed opportunity to generate a little revenue by having sports competitions, tournaments on the property, some of the larger pieces, and other opportunities to expand the parks. And then what I was bringing up was just trying to find that balance between providing commercial and residential growth while preserving our agricultural lands, because we can't make more prime soil, and Hollister sits right in that prime soil conditions. And that also agriculture provides some great tourism opportunities. There's a lot of agricultural tourism going on, so we want to promote that. And where we decide that we do need to convert land that's in productive agriculture, we want to make sure we mitigate that and preserve permanently some agriculture in other areas.
Great. Thank you for that report. And that's a great segue into one of the other groups that'll be looking at agricultural preservation. in the next couple of sessions. So I think we'll stop there for now. Torina, if it's you, you can stop sharing your screen. And we're gonna, without further ado, move on to round 2. And I'm gonna do another presentation on round 2 items, which I have to find here somewhere. Hang on just a moment. That I want to reassure you, it will not take as long as the last one did because I have a little bit less to cover. We're going to be looking in the round 2 groups, we're going to be looking at parks and school funding, which we've already talked about, circulation, and there are 2 groups actually looking at housing. So I only have 2 reports right now, 2 subjects, one on circulation and one on housing. So in terms of circulation, there's several different items that you'll be talking about in that group. You'll be talking first about complete streets and safe routes to school. By complete streets, we mean streets that are intended to accommodate all users, not just vehicles. They have sidewalks, bike lanes, transit lanes, crosswalks, median islands, curb extensions, and complete streets are particularly important as safe routes to school, which encourage K-12 students to walk or bicycle to school. So we want to ask you about what efforts for complete streets and safe routes to school you would like to see implemented in Hollister, and we have a couple different options for you in that regard. You'll also be looking at level of service. I know that many people are concerned about vehicle congestion in Hollister. The 2005 general plan does use what's called level of service to evaluate roadway impacts, and the general plan suggests a level of service C for all signalized and unsignalized intersections. And this is really confusing for people because we all went to public school, or we all went to school of some sort, and everybody knows that A and B are the best grade. In traffic, C is pretty darn good. C is good enough for most people, and many communities are now accepting D and E, and it's really only when you get to F that it's unacceptable. But so the Hollister general plan is actually quite conservative when it says we want everywhere to be a C. There are intersections in Hollister that do operate at those standards, but 8 or so of 37 intersections don't make that standard. And so you're going to be looking at whether it makes sense to maintain that standard, or if you possibly want to lower to D or E in other parts of the city, like in downtown or at other signalized or intersections or routes headed out of the city. And then you'll also be looking at roundabouts. Roundabouts do have a lot of community benefits. And in fact, there's a 2019 City Council resolution that establishes roundabouts to be considered to improve traffic circulation at some intersections. We want to find out from you whether the general plan should include policies to develop roundabouts at existing or future intersections. So those are the issues you'll be looking at for circulation. Many of you will be talking about housing issues. And we have 2 key issues, actually 3 issues there. The first of them, and you may, those of you who are facilitating, you may want to actually do this one less, because this is what I call an inside baseball kind of issue. This is the issue of how we count residential density in the general plan. Right now, the general plan uses what's called net density that says so taking an example, if you have an existing 20-acre parcel and you're going to subdivide it, the first thing you're going to do is build roads. And those roads will actually take about 30% of the land. So if you had 20 acres to start with, you're going to lose about 6 acres to roads, and you'll only have 14 acres. The net density is calculated based on those remaining 14 acres. That's the net amount. The gross density is based on the total parcel of 20. So you can see that if you divide any number of units, like 100 units get built, you divide by 20, that's 5 units per acre. But if you divide that 100 by 14, it's a higher density. So the net density that the city is using today has some limitations. It might be more clear to use gross density instead. But if you do use gross density, you might also, you might want to use gross density instead. So we're asking you to give your opinions about net versus gross density. But a couple of other more sort of urgent issues perhaps are looking at high density residential. Right now, the city has a single general plan designation that allows 12 to 35 dwelling units per acre. 12 is low enough that you get townhouses. The intent of this designation is probably to create more apartments and townhouses. And in fact, the state of California requires the city to have some land where a minimum of 20 units per acre will be built. This general plan also has relatively low numbers for the maximum high density in both the downtown and in some high density areas. So we want to ask you, should there be some areas with a minimum of 20 dwelling units per acre to get apartments and townhouses? And we're suggesting these areas that are beige and pink on this map. We also want to ask you if you would want to see the maximum density increased from not just 35, but up to 65, and perhaps even up to 125 dwelling units for real downtown apartments in the downtown only. So those are some very important questions you'll be looking at. And then finally, we want to talk with you about inclusionary housing. Inclusionary housing is a program that requires developers to make a percentage of their new housing be reserved for low or moderate income households. It increases housing affordability, it reduces housing segregation, it supports state mandated housing targets, but it does also impact profit margins and can make residential development projects less feasible. And of course, many people buy in Hollister because the housing is more affordable there. So an inclusionary program might have the effect of making some of those housing units more expensive. The Hollister Municipal Code already requires inclusionary housing for conversions of existing units to market rate family units, but it does not require inclusionary housing for new subdivisions or development projects. So we want to ask, should you have an inclusionary housing requirement? If so, what types of housing projects should it apply to? What should be the required percentage of low or very low income units? And should there be alternative compliance methods? Instead of making a portion of the housing units affordable, could a developer, for instance, instead pay a fee to build housing elsewhere? Could they dedicate land without building the housing units? Or could they actually build the units on sites off of their main development site somewhere else in the city? So these would all be possibilities as well. So many of you will be talking about housing, and you'll be looking at both these issues of densities as well as an inclusionary housing program, and perhaps this question of net versus gross density as well. And that's the end of this presentation, much shorter than the other one. I'll stop sharing my screen again, and then Lindsay can put us into our groups.
Hi guys, all right, you're gonna get another notification in a second here. Hi there, I can see that Sonja and Lynn and Jason still need some help here. Did you guys receive an invitation? Do you want me to send you another one? Okay, looks like Lynn's got it. Okay. Hi, Jason, you're muted. So I can't see whether you have been invited to a group. You've been invited to group housing too. Okay, great. And then CG God, I know that you have opted not to participate in a group. So you're invited to housing group 2, but you do not have to join if you do not want to. And then Maria and Mariah, you two are free to go. We do not need, we're not going to have another 5th group for small breakout rooms. So if you two want to sign off, you can go ahead. If you want to stick around, let me know, and I can pop you in a small breakout room if you'd like.
I will be logging off. Thank you.
All right, thank
So
you.
thank you.
Okay, thanks, Mariah. Hi, David. David, you are muted.
I just came back because I noticed there were people not in groups.
Yeah.
So that's fine. And CG God, I'm just curious if you want to say who you are or anything. I know you were in a group in round 1 and didn't really speak also. Are you you're just here as an observer?
And you're muted if you're wanting to speak. Let me see here. I can ask you to unmute here if you'd like to speak.
Okay, well, it's certainly not a problem for a person to just be here and observe. So if you'd
Right.
like to do that, that's fine. Lindsay, can you then put me back into housing too?
Yes, I
Thank you.
can. Mhm.
Lindsay, is there any way I can go put into the round 2 for housing? My internet went down.
Hi, Jason. Of course, yeah. I was wondering what happened to you there. Let
I
me
don't
get you
know.
a group. All right, here you go.
Thank you.
Sure. Taking a second here. Hi, David.
Hi there. So I'm just trying to, I just was looking at the listings. So we only have like one person in one group and two people in another group. There aren't nearly as many people here, I guess, as we expected. Is that true?
Yes, and I mean, that's kind of what we expect is about 50% of people max show up to the actual meeting than who register.
Uh-huh.
So it's not that surprising, I guess.
Okay. I guess when we do tomorrow, I mean, we definitely didn't need to have made two groups for housing because we have two different groups meeting. One of them has one person in it.
I will say there is someone who just rejoined and they had accidentally dropped off the call. So there were supposed to be 3 and 5, I think, in the groups or something like that for housing. But-
Well, there's, group 2 has, I believe, one actual person in it. I think everybody else is from somewhere else.
Mhm. And the housing group, yes,
Yeah.
and that's not supposed to have happened. Someone who was a public member dropped off the call. There was at least supposed to be another member of the public there.
Right, right. So I don't know, I mean, how many total participants do we actually have at this point?
It seems like a lot of people dropped off after the first round. So let me count right now. We have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11, 12, 13.
13, okay. And we had somewhat more before, is that right?
Yeah, we had in the 20s before.
Right, okay, okay. So can you see how many people will be in each of the last groups?
Yes, I'm color coding in a different spreadsheet to see who will be here. And we don't have anyone for retail, leakage, job creation, or tourism for the last group. So that's not going to be a group. Let me
Okay.
see here. So we'll have 3 groups. So we'll have arts and culture, farmland, and growth management. And as I think you can know, we're already behind on time. We're 14 minutes behind.
Oh, really? Do we have something else to do? Because we're supposed to end at 11, right? And my calculations were that this group ends at 10:34. Oh, and then, right, we're supposed to end at 11 and we won't get done with the third group until 11. Got it, yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, I guess I did know that. So we'll just wrap up real quickly. I think we can be done. If we stay on this schedule, if we end this one, maybe a few minutes early. I had it at 10:34. Maybe we end at like 10:32 or something.
Okay,
And
I can
then
do.
if we did 25 for the next one, then we'd end that one at 10:57.
Yeah.
And we can be done pretty close.
You said 10, and we'll end at 10:30. What on this next one?
10:32 for this one. And then 10:57 for the last one.
Okay, I need to do some calculation changes. Okay, I'm going to send a warning to people in 2 minutes then that they're
Yeah.
almost done.
That seems good. And remind me, there's 2 housing groups meeting, there's a circulation group, and what's the other one meeting right now?
Parks new school funding, so a second round of that.
Okay. And how many people are in that one?
There's 3 people in that one.
Okay. And how many people in the circulation group?
1, 2, 3.
Okay, great. Okay, thanks.
Sure.
I'm just gonna mute myself for a minute.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed your small groups. We did have a couple people drop out, and so I think we had 1 or 2 groups that only had 1 or 2 people in them, and I apologize for that. But I do want to get reports back. We had 2 different groups that, well, actually, maybe we'll start with parks and schools because we had, that'll be the second time we'll have heard about that subject. So those of you who did talk about parks and schools this time through, shall we hear from you?
So we talked about Vista Park, or we talked about the expansion of the 5 acres per 1,000 residents, like, and that's something that we all agreed upon. We talked about Vista Park Hill and needing to kind of update the current layout, or the field needs work, the buildings need a little bit of help, and then also just changing the parcel of land to away from city zoning, so that and turning it into a park, so that we can get funding from it privately, instead of having to go through the city to be able to get grants to upgrade, like the community garden and the area just outside of Park Hill that could be zoned, and increase our park zoning that way. And then schools, we talked about just doing our due diligence and doing the research on growth to make sure that we're not building schools and our community just stops growing. We don't need these schools anymore, as well as having the some kind of pre-development conditions that you have to go through. So you can't just just pop up a school without having a cafeteria or a multi-purpose room like they've done in Santana Ranch.
Great. Okay, thank you, Rob, for that report. We had 2 groups that talked about housing, and I think one of them maybe only had 1 person in it. But how about if one of you who did talk about housing goes ahead, and then if somebody wants to add something, we can do that.
Yes, so this is Jag. I was the only one in my group. So it's more of a personal level. In terms of housing, many questions that came up, it really depended on what kind of information we have in terms of data. But the main key points that I, made a note of in my group is the preserving of the scenic beauty that we have in the city of Hollister, and also taking into consideration, how many units per acre designations. So are we going to use net or gross? And in order to answer that question, we need information like, okay, if it's net, the pros of nets is that, there'll be more space, less congestion, widen roads. But if we take gross into effect, how wide will the roads be? How many units will be built versus net? So again, on a personal level, I prefer space. I think that's part of the reason when COVID-19 struck us last year, and its effects are still upon us. Many families moved out of congested cities and started moving towards our area, including Central Valley, Sacramento, and so forth. So I think when we define housing, the number of units, we need to take into consideration about how wide the roads are going to be, how big are the lot size is going to be, the square footage of the homes. The demand is another, is that demand going to be ongoing? And about inclusion, definitely, yes, every community needs to be equitable, right? Everybody should have the basic necessity of housing and food and shelter and so forth. So basically, from my end, data is needed. We need that sort of economic outlook for the future and work on the data that will be presented to us. So that was my summation.
Great, thank you, Jag. And I do want to make sure you and others know that there are some extensive, I know we didn't have a chance to talk about them today, but there's very extensive background reports about housing need, the housing mix, economic conditions. Those are all on our project website. So if you want to get to know any of that information, please go ahead and look at that. The other housing group that met, do you all want to add anything?
Sonia? Were you gonna be our spokesperson?
Yes, I'm sorry, I thought it was growth management, not housing. I was confused. Yeah, so we discussed medium density, which is, I guess, 20 units per acre. We reviewed the map that shows that most of it is concentrated in the northern part of Hollister. And I think there was some concerns about that. People thought that it would be better for the community if we had those high density projects spread out more throughout the community, rather than just keeping them in one area. Some of the reasons were schooling. You know, if you're going to have high density, or excuse me, medium density housing, it's going to be a lot more students per household, and that it could have a negative effect on the schools. So that maybe by doing that and spreading them out, it would put less pressure on one's, one school in the area or junior high school. Another thing was pointed out that a lot of times these high or medium density projects don't pencil out. In other words, to actually build them and bring contractors in, a lot of times the financial part of it just doesn't work out. So there was, let's see, I think I covered everything. Was there anything else that I missed on that? No, I think that was pretty it. But I think the biggest concern was the way the map looked like it was just all focused in one area. So.
Great. Thanks for that input. That's very, very helpful for us to hear. Then the last group that met in this round was talking about circulation, roads and streets. Who was going to report there?
Hi, I'll report. My name is Jennifer Lane. So in the group, we were generally, of course, very supportive of complete streets, safe routes to school, and talked about having an emphasis on sort of the experience of the individual resident navigating the streets and families navigating streets, as opposed to just focusing on how cars get through the city of Hollister, how fast or how slow. And part of that consideration is of course supporting efforts to increase pedestrian access, bike access, continuity of pathways throughout Hollister. So one member on the committee lives in one neighborhood, the school's in another neighborhood, and there's just a real inconsistency between sidewalks and bike lanes to get to school. So the default is the car. We talked also about how circulation, as it will exist in the general plan, intersects with other efforts like the arts element, environmental justice, equity. So there's a real opportunity to look at those other areas and see how does navigating throughout the city support those other priorities. The other thing we discussed as well was just the ability for the city to increase its capacity to go after funding to actually fund these projects for complete streets and safe routes to school. So there's a lot of other opportunities out there that the city might not be able to harness just because it doesn't have a designated grant manager or something like that. And then there was a discussion on levels of service, but Frederick, maybe you want to chime in on that. I think you might be on mute.
Apologies. So the discussion was on level of service C versus D. When a level of service C is typically what one would see at most of the intersections in the city, and it's actually quite okay. You don't wait too long, you get through an intersection. Level of service D is also still acceptable. But if many cities, if you try to maintain a level of service C, it becomes actually very expensive, right? Because you need to keep building an intersection out and out, and you need to buy up the corners. So what a lot of cities are doing right now is to say, well, maybe our downtown, maybe our industrial areas, maybe where the shopping is, the retail areas is where we can actually anticipate a lower level of service. So maybe level of service D is more acceptable there, just to sort of manage and have funding available and actually manage the traffic in that regard. We want quality of life closer to our residential neighborhoods, and that's probably where we want the better level of service. But where we get to these areas where there's more a concentration of vehicles, maybe a lower level of service will be more acceptable.
Great, thank you, Frederick. And I take it that's something that the other members of your group came to understand and were willing to consider.
Yeah, unfortunately we finished just before that discussion, so we got that.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you all for that. Let's transition and go quickly to our third and final group time. I'm going to once again share my screen. Let's see, to do that, I go here, I go here, I go here. We'll have, it says on this slide that we have 4 groups meeting now. I believe that all the people who signed up for retail leakage economic development issues have all left at this point. So I think we'll have just 3 groups. Some of you are in the growth management group, and I presented about that already. And the rest of you will be looking at either farmland mitigation, sensitive habitats and heritage trees, or looking at arts and culture. And so I'm going to talk briefly about both of those 2 items, starting with the farmland habitat and tree issues. In terms of farmland mitigation, the California Environmental Quality Act does require mitigation for impacts to agricultural lands. And the agricultural mitigation ratio is usually 1-to-1 or 2-to-1. That is that for every acre of land that's developed, if it's agricultural land, that you develop either you preserve 1 other acre of existing agricultural land, or perhaps even you preserve 2 acres of existing agricultural land for every 1 acre that gets developed, so that you really are maintaining the agricultural map base. And you see the map here on the side that shows all of the existing agricultural lands around the city of Hollister. So we're going to be asking you to look at whether you would like to see such a mitigation program, what would be the appropriate ratio, what should be the city's role, whether it's to enforce and management or to enforce only and assign management responsibilities to a conservation organization, or if the city would have no role. And we're going to be asking you what kinds of land should be mitigated. Is it based on the type of farmland, such as prime farmland or unique? Is it any land with an existing agricultural land use designation? Is it any land that was recently used for crop farming? So those are some issues you'll be looking at with farmland mitigation. Some of you will also be talking about, that same group, you'll be talking about sensitive habitats, and particularly for the California red-legged frog and the California tiger salamander. Those are largely over on the east side of town. They're shown in this area with the hatching here. And there is a question of whether future residential development should be allowed and planned in this area. So what policies, if any, should the general plan include to avoid impacts to those 2 species? And then finally, we'd like you to look at heritage trees, which do provide a number of community benefits. There is a city street tree ordinance. The existing general plan promotes preservation of trees, but there's not a clear definition of what a significant tree is, and no measures in place to ensure heritage tree protection. So would you like to do that? Would you like additional policies in the general plan? And if so, what sorts to preserve heritage trees? So that's one of your 2 groups, or 3 groups. The other group will be talking about arts and culture. And we are preparing a standalone arts element as part of this general plan update. Some of you have met our consultant, Todd Bressie, who is working on that arts issue. And he's already been interviewing a number of arts and cultural organizations in Hollister. And he's identified the broader arts movements within Hollister, and also how much of the city's culture is informal and related to Latinx culture, including mural making, mariachi bands, ballet folklorico, and other similar things. So we want to talk all about various arts and culture approaches in Hollister. You have before you some potential goals, and we'll ask you to consider those. We'll ask you to consider some policies and actions broadly about arts and culture, also to look at arts and culture funding approaches, and also to look at the possibilities for various types of facilities and events. So you'll have all these lists in front of you to be considering whether you think some of these are better ideas than others that should be included in that arts element. And lastly, you'll be looking at regulatory changes as well. And that ends my presentation. I'm going to stop the share, and we'll be able to split into those 3 rooms, and we'll come back in about 12 minutes after your discussion and wrap up the meeting. Thank you all.
Okay, I'm about to send you to your groups. There may be some people who are left in the waiting room because the main room, because I had a technical glitch, and it'll just take a moment for Lindsay to assign you. So just please hold on. And I'm opening now.
Carol, do you know which group you want to go to? Are you going to the farmland group?
No, I declined that.
Do you
I didn't-
prefer to be in growth management or arts and culture?
I'm going to do growth management tomorrow, so I think I'm done for the day.
Okay. Well, then thank you for being here. We will see you
Can I-
tomorrow.
I just want to thank you so much. It was very nice. I look forward to it. Thank you so much to all of your group there.
Great. Good to see you today. Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.
David, I'm probably done as well, right?
Yeah, I think you're done. You can take off. And I don't know if anyone in this group, like Lindsay knows, if we need you tomorrow. I don't know if we have a circulation group tomorrow evening.
I think we do. Yeah.
I'm going to be on. Yep,
Okay,
I'll make it
great.
tomorrow as well. So 6 o'clock.
Okay, great. All right. Thanks for being here, Fred.
Thank you.
Thanks for your help in our group.
Yes, thank you so much.
And then Angelica and Aurelie, I think you're probably done too. I mean, you're certainly welcome to stay, but we had one less group. Those people all disappeared. So if you want. Welcome back, everybody. We've just concluded our third round of small groups. There were some really good discussions. I got to listen in on a few of them, and we had discussions about growth management, farmland and resource protection, and arts and culture. So why don't we do them in that order? Carrie, who was going to report on from your growth management group?
Jeff.
Hi there. So we discussed three basic things. We discussed the approach to growth. We discussed public facilities and infrastructure. And then we did discuss land supply. I think with regard to approach, there's a wide range. It's everything from, I think, staying with the more traditional roots of orchards and not having walls everywhere, and just getting, the current growth under control insofar as, having people live in close proximity to places where they can shop. I think that there was also a lot of discussion about more of a mid-range growth where community is prospering, yet there are public facilities that can provide jobs for growth coming in. That was a very big part of the discussion. Was you can't just have growth without jobs. That causes all sorts of traffic problems. I think that's a common theme actually that I've heard throughout today. There was also a perspective of growth being dictated by market demand, yet tempered by the fact that you still need appropriate infrastructure to serve the growth that's coming in. Our group did talk a little bit about land supply, not too much, and I think that the key issue was, if more land is not annexed into the city, then more of the development, housing development, would be in the multifamily rather than the single family genre. And we also talked a little bit about the current level of growth at 200 homes per year, up to 400 homes a year. But I don't believe our group really had an opinion so much on the amount of growth that should come in or additional acres that should be annexed. It was more of just discussing the parameters of what additional land coming into the city would mean.
Thank you, Jeff. Really appreciate it. Let's hear next from the Farmland and Resource Group. Who's the spokesperson for that group?
That would be me. Am I unmuted?
Yes, you are.
I'm Lynn.
Go ahead.
Okay, good. I was talking a minute ago and like I can't see myself. So we had several questions that we were addressing, and first was on mitigation of farmland, and the decision that we came up with was that we would want to see at least 1-to-1 mitigation, because that still means you lose half of your farmland. 2-to-1 would preserve more of it, and it's such a vital industry in our city that would be valuable to do. We agreed that having the city enforce that, but having a local conservation group like the Land Trust manage it would be the most efficient way to do it. We would want to see not just the prime farmland and irrigated farmland protected, but also the rangeland areas. And then when we talked about sensitive habitats, we were feeling, oh, thanks, there's those notes. We were saying that we wanted to see the protection of number 3, which would be prohibit the development within areas where there's identified species occupation, but also recognizing opportunities to offset the impact to the developer. So having mitigation banks or ways that it allows for the developer for the burden to be shared by the community overall is what I was trying to get to. And then on heritage trees, Jag was saying that she really wants to see the heritage trees protected completely and preserved in the city. It's really important to her to see growth, but do it in a way where there's boundaries for the protection of natural habitat and there's preservation of open land.
Great. Okay, thank you very much for that report, Lynn. And our last group
Thank
of
you.
this time and the last group of the day is the Arts and Culture Group. Who's going to report there?
I'll do that. We all agreed those 6 goals that were listed up there were in line with what we want, what we see for our community, with the addition of sustainability. That just, that is one of those big goals that we need to include on the top.
Yeah, and you're saying a sustainability for the arts movement.
Yes.
For the arts. Great.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so just long term, being able to provide funding for that, which it comes to the second, or the funding part, and we all all those are great ideas, and that if we really want to keep arts around, that pursuing all those different avenues is going to be beneficial for us. And then also that the city council already has an art commission or a separate, like kind of ad hoc committee to help, and they're looking for commissioners right now. So.
Great. Thank you for that report too. And that does conclude the meeting. I want to thank you all for all your participation. I want to remind you that we do have a meeting again tomorrow night at 6 o'clock, and all of you are welcome to attend once more if you want to talk about some more of these topics. There's obviously a lot of things to be discussed and considered. That meeting is at 6 tomorrow, and you would sign up online at hollister2040.org. At hollister2040.org, you also will find an online survey that allows you to go into a lot more detail about every one of these items. So I know for many of you, you just scratched the surface today. You can go to the online survey. You can also find all the background information and read that information. Many of you today asked for additional information to have available to you, so you can look at that information, and then you'll be able to fill out the surveys and answer all the questions in as much detail as you would like. And then we do have the GPAC meetings coming up as well on Tuesday nights, starting March 23rd from 6 to 8. And you would be very welcome to attend those via Zoom as well. I want to thank you again for your time today. It's really a pleasure to be able to work with you, and we'll look forward to your continuing participation in the process. Thank you very much. Have a great day. Bye-bye.